Warm welcome to each and every one of you. And good afternoon. Friday afternoons, always a tough act to do. Hopefully, I can keep you guys awake. But thanks for joining today. Um, what we're going to do today is we will spend the first 20 to 30 minutes actually going through what is Satkam, why Satkam, and some of the purpose behind it. And then secondly, we will do a session on one of the key skills that we think is important for success for individuals, right? So that's the idea. In the middle, I might be showing a couple of videos. And so in case you can't hear it or can't see it, please let me know. I will try and keep my eyes on the chat window, but it's quite possible that I might miss it. So feel free to unmute yourself and let me know that you can't hear or see things. The second thing is, let's try and make this a little bit interactive. So if you have questions, thoughts, ideas, obviously we would love to hear your voice, and so you can unmute and talk. But most students, for whatever reason, are a little bit shy. And so if you do fall in that category, feel free to type away whatever your thoughts or questions might be in the chat window, and we'll try and address them. Yeah. Ganpat, let's try and launch the survey of the college list in maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. We are supposed to have, I don't know, 20 odd colleges or universities across different states in India join today at this time. But I feel like some of the colleges have still not started. And so they'll probably join us a couple of weeks later. Yeah. So having said that, let us begin. Yeah. Hopefully you can see my screen. Let me know. Thumbs up or yes or no. Okay. Thanks, Adipta. So let's get started with Satkam, right? Why do we have Satkam? So first and foremost, the people who are a part of Satkam are all volunteers. All of us actually have real jobs, and we are working in the industry in various different companies. And across the, whatever 50 odd volunteers that we have, we've probably hired, I don't know, over our entire tenure, probably 10,000 plus engineers, a total. And when some of us had kind of gotten together, one of the things, can I just request like a stop on the emoji? I mean, it's funny to an extent, but beyond that, it starts becoming irritating. So one of the things that we had noticed after, doing so much hiring was we felt that there is this gap that exists between people who graduate from industries in, from colleges and universities in India, and what the expectation of the different companies is, right? And so the reason we've started this initiative was to try and fill that gap between what companies want from their employees and what the students who graduate from colleges and universities come out and have to offer, right? So that's the primary reason of starting this. And we'll go into, some of the topics that we are going to talk about through these sessions. Now, just be aware that I do realize some of the students who are joining today might be repeat students, as in, we overall have about 70 plus hours of curriculum that we have. And last semester, we had covered about 28 to 30 hours. And this semester also, we plan to conduct about 28 to 30 hours. Some of the topics, the ones that we consider as extremely important, will be repeated for obvious reasons, right? And this is actually a way for you to try and interact with people from the industry and hopefully learn and gain from their knowledge as well, right? So that's the purpose behind Satcom. How is it conducted? Essentially, we work with various different colleges and universities. Right. We have coverage across about 8 states in India and totally about 40, 50 colleges that participate in this program. This is primarily conducted online, about 30 hours per semester. Every week, we do sessions on Tuesdays and Fridays. Tuesdays with a certain set of colleges and today with a certain set of colleges. We do have evaluations that are again optional. Really, you don't have to do it. It's not mandatory. But for people who do take it, I mean, it's an opportunity for you to learn various different things that might be covered in the topics that we do. And the other reason why I would encourage you to be participative and engaging is we do monitor and track people who are active, who are participative, and we will give an opportunity to those rewarding students to actually have an individual one-on-one with somebody from the industry, whoever they want, right, in terms of expertise. If you are evaluating, for instance, saying, you know what, I don't like software development and I want to go into design, or I want to go into data science, depending on your interest, if you have questions or want to talk to people from the industry, we can facilitate that and help you while you are still in college, to help you interact with somebody on an individual basis to address your questions or concerns. But that will be limited to the students who are extremely participative through these sessions. Yeah, so that's a bonus, that's an extra for you to be attentive, right? Who is delivering? As I said, this is just a sampling of the companies that the volunteers work at. And it's across the globe. We actually do have volunteers from outside India as well. Within India, majority of our volunteers are either Pune or Bangalore based. Some of us are startup founders as well, having started our own companies over the years. And then some of us obviously, work at large multinational employers. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Please keep yourself on mute, unless you have something to say, and you're welcome to say. Our journey, we started about 2.5 years ago. We initially started this as a pilot with a couple of colleges. And then over a period of time, obviously, this has grown, this has increased, right? So we went from 2 colleges to today about 50 colleges. We do have various different programs. There are some colleges with which we are working on an entrepreneurship program. There are some colleges with whom we work for the industry readiness program. There are some programs we run with the faculty of different universities. And our plan is in this summer, we actually also want to start a project program, which is people who may be interested in solving a certain problem and being a part of a solution, and are willing to work with people from across the country on various different problems. We will be starting or kicking that program off in the summer. So if any of you here are kind of interested in doing a quick project for 6-8 weeks through the summer, right, which will obviously enable you to learn and work with people from across the country, feel free to reach out to us as well. Yeah. Now, before we move on, let me ask a question to all of you, and you can obviously respond back, right? All of you have been at schools, right? You've studied in schools. So my first question to you would be, how were you evaluated, or how was it determined whether you were a good student or not? What is the mechanism that schools use to figure out and separate out the quote unquote good students from the not so good students? You can type in the answer, or you can say out your answer as well. Yeah. What do you think? Come on, we have like 100 180 odd people on this call, right? The grading system, Sudipta says. Perfect. Right? You had exams and you got graded, you had marks and you got a report card, as Faizan says. And that was how you figured out, who were the good students. Now you went to college, right? Now, when you go to college, right, how is it again? How is a college determining who are the good students? What is the mechanism a college or a university uses to figure out who is a good student versus not? What do you think? You guys are all in, your universities and colleges. How is the college determining quote unquote success for you? Who is considered a successful student in a college? Okay, those who are in good touch with the teachers, says Faizan. All right, that's one mechanism, right? But you can't take that with you to really determine, right? Again, that's true. Samarth says it's a combination of grades and extracurricular activities, right? But the most common thing, right, across any college that you go to, essentially it's the same thing that was in schools, right? Which is you have exams, maybe you have practicals, more practicals in your colleges, but essentially it's again back to marks and grades, right? Basically that determines success in schools and colleges. Now, once you are done with your college, most of you, some of you probably will start your own company, but most of you, I assume, will go off and join different companies, right? So the next question is, how will, and again, every company has like their top 10-15% of performers and the middle 70%, and then the bottom 15 to 20%, right? How do you think the company is going to figure out who are their top 10 or 15%? What is going to be the mechanism? So far, you know exactly, right? When you are in school, you'll have an exam, you have to answer those questions and you'll get a grade, marks. When you went to college, it was the same. But then now, after college, you're going to go join a company. How is the company going to determine who is a better performer? Who is their top performer? What do you think? What do you guys say? Okay, Pranav is saying knowledge. Just a follow-up question, Pranav, if you have some thoughts. How do you think a company is going to determine knowledge? Sia is saying skills. If you have, if you're good in skills, but what skills, Sia? What skills do you think companies are looking for? Keep this coming, guys. I mean, this is good. This is good. All right. Faizan is saying based on how a certain person completes a task given by the company. Okay, that could be one. So Dipta is saying communication and project management. Those who create value, Meghraj is saying. How do you figure out what is the value an individual employee is adding? Quantity and quality of work. Person who is taking initiatives. Okay, fair enough, right? So now you suddenly are realizing, right? Like so far in life, there's been a clear way of figuring out how you are going to be successful. Just as how well do you do in your exams. But in 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years, you will be out in the open world and, it could be quality of work, it could be quantity of work, it could be the person who's taking the initiatives, those people who align their work with the company goal, it could be communication, it could be project management, the person who has skills, right? So suddenly it's very open-ended. There is no clear definition of how are you going to be successful in a company that you join, right? And I am sure most of you would care or would want a successful career, right? Ask yourself the question, when you graduate and go join a company, don't you want to be in that top 10-15% of employees in that company so that you get higher raises, you get faster promotions, you get more recognition, you get more rewards, right? Who doesn't want to, right? But we've suddenly figured out that, you know what, so far it was only one way, but now it's all open-ended. And I don't know in which company what will be the most important attributes that will be needed, right? So that's the situation right now. Ganpat, can you please launch the poll? Right, so Ganpat is launching a poll just for us to figure out which colleges are have started attending versus who haven't. So you should see a list of colleges. Can I just request each of you to just go into the poll? There's a list of colleges that is listed. Just pick one of the colleges, whichever college that you are a part of. It's essentially actually three lists, because I guess we have about 24 colleges that are registered to participate. Aditya, if you click on the polls, or if you look at, there is an activities at the bottom right, you click on that, it will give you another menu which should have polls over there, and you should be able to traverse through, right? So far I see only 1, 3, 8, a few. So please continue. The poll is going to be up. We just want to get a sense of, the colleges that are here versus those that still haven't begun their sessions. Yeah. All right. So let's go to the question of, so how is success in a company going to be determined? Oh, let me first share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Okay. So we just talked about this, right? In schools, you basically have the top 10 to 15%. The determining factor is who gets more marks, right? And typically when you go to college, the same trend continues, right? So the person who was like doing academically extremely well in school will continue doing well in college, right? But here's the difference, right? When you look at industry, when we look at in our companies, look at the top 10, 15% and the bottom 10, 15%, what is surprising is that it doesn't always translate to the people who were doing well in schools and colleges will continue doing well in the industry, right? It's possible a lot of them may, but it's not a guarantee, right? While from school to college, it's pretty much a guarantee. There might just be a few exceptions. However, in the industry, it changes suddenly, right? And obviously that's because in the school and colleges, there was just one way, marks, that determined, right? While in an industry, it's many, many other different things, right? So what we have done, right? I mean, if you look at it, essentially it's a combination. I think somebody said kind of knowledge, right? One is, it's a combination of how much you know, right? What kind of knowledge do you have? What kind of skills do you demonstrate, right? And we'll talk of, like, there are hundreds, if not thousands of skills that we all need to demonstrate. And then there is the mindset, right? So that's the combination. We don't need to spend too much time because this is more, a little bit more jargon, but what we feel is that essentially when we talk to, the 50 odd volunteers, and these are all people who have worked in many, many, many different industries or companies, right? What we realized was that besides the know-how, besides your core technical skills, whatever be your background, right? If you are an accountant, you've got to be an amazing accountant. If you are an engineer, you've got to be a phenomenal engineer, right? So that's kind of table stakes, right? And besides the fact that for success in life, unfortunately, hard work is just mandatory, right? You may get lucky, but still throughout life, unless somebody, is willing to commit to working hard, it's extremely difficult. Then there is kind of professionalism, which we'll talk about. But besides that, there are essentially these 7 skills that we together in Satkam believe will determine your success, whether in a company or whether even if you want to start your own company, right? And these are very vague for most people. When you go join a company, your boss is going to say, you know what, I need you to be a problem solver, right? And he'll just say that, right? And then somebody else may say, oh, we need better critical thinking from him, right? But unfortunately, nobody ever spends time to actually define, right? When they say you need to be curious, or you need to have better articulation skills, like what does that really mean, and how do I actually get better at it, right? So the good news for all of you is that these skills are actually not skills that you are born with, right? So some of you may have it naturally, but these are skills that can be learned over a period of time, right? So there is a chance for each and every one of you on this call to actually develop and become really good at some of them, right? The second good news, or maybe actually it's not so good news, is actually these are all compounding skills, right? What I mean by that is these aren't skills that you can get better at just overnight, which is, you know what, you've decided that you are going to be a better critical thinker. You can't overnight become a better critical thinker. If you make effort, if you take steps towards it, you will get better at it in a month, and then you will be a little more better in 6 months, and then you will be way better in 2 years, and then you will be really good in 5 years, right? So these are all compounding skills, which is the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you will get at it. And these will help determine your success in the corporate world, right? So what we are going to do is we are picking 4 of these out of these 7. And actually, the first 4 Satkam sessions that you are going to go through are going to touch upon these 4 skills that we feel are super critical, right? And we will be starting with one of them today in the next 5 minutes or so. Yeah. So that's the essential, thinking that we have behind Satkam, right? Us, when we were going through and we, finished college and started working, a lot of this was things that we learned after having been in the industry for 5 years, 10 years, and then started working on them, right? And our hope really is that if some of you are able to start understanding this earlier, start working on developing these skills earlier, the better are your chances of success much earlier in life, right? And you don't need to go through the grind of figuring some of these things after you've worked in the industry, right? So that's the concept behind Satkam. It's a completely pro bono. As I said, all of us are in the industry. We still have a full-time job. We still are working or running our companies, but we want to try and spend at least 2 hours every week to try and arm you with what we think can help you become successful in your life. Yeah. So that's about it. I'm not going to go through more slides. Yeah, let's just skip all of this and we will head towards the first session. But before I do that, let me just open up this one. So Aditya is asking, I appreciate you teaching. Thanks, Aditya. But will there be a certificate provided? So I think it depends on the college or the university. I mean, see, we have no qualms of providing a certificate. There are 2 types of certificates that we do, right? One is a Satkam participant, which is people who've participated in this program, attend the program, do the assignments, do the case studies that we will provide in the middle, will get a Satkam participated. While people who are more proactive, and if you remember the 7 skills, one of them was proactiveness, which is people who participate in these sessions, go the extra step, will get what we call a Satkam certified certificate, which is kind of, again, a grading system, right? Satkam participated means you showed up. Certified means you are demonstrating some of the skills which will determine your success. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. I am curious if there were any other questions or thoughts that any of you who are on the call, or comments that you might have about Satkam or the program or anything from a logistics or any point of view. I'll wait for a minute or so, but any thoughts, any questions, please type that into the chat window. Yes, Aditya. The sessions, just for your information, it will be every Friday for you guys at the same time, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. If you do miss a particular session, the same session is actually conducted on Tuesday and Friday. So, Tuesday is at 10 a.m. The link, the Google Meet link, will be also the same. So, don't try looking for a different link. It's the same link. If you save it out, you should be able to join at the same time. We actually also do record these sessions in case for whatever reason some of you miss it and are interested. You can always go back and refer to the recordings of the session. For some of the sessions, we will have a multiple choice questionnaire, like a quiz, which should take about 20 minutes, that you can try out. At the middle or through the session, maybe sometime in March, and towards the end, April or May, we will also provide like a case study based approach, which is we'll actually give a real world industry company facing problem, and have you use these skills to either, basically solve problems by critically analyzing and thinking of solutions of what you would have done had you been in that company or in that team to solve the problem. Some of them may require you kind of doing a presentation and recording yourself and sending it in. Again, these are the things, if you do, there is a chance of people getting the Satkam certified. And the only reason we are doing this is just giving you practice, right? Because that is what you will have to do once you go join a company, right? It is going to be people who are solving problems, having the ability to record and give presentations, are going to see success. Yeah, Aditya, I mean, sure, you can watch the recordings. It's not a problem at all. Yeah, I think, Yugandhar, the question, also, it may not happen for all the colleges, because it's only, it's about 40 plus colleges, and we only have about 12 to 14 weeks, and all of us are working. But at least 75% of the colleges, some of us will actually be making a physical presence, which is we will come on site to some of the colleges and conduct some sessions face to face with the students. Those may not be on Friday. Those we will coordinate with your respective colleges. So at that time, you will get the opportunity to interact face to face with some of us, right? So we are starting to create our travel plans, and do intend to visit. Typically, Pune is very easy for us. Coimbatore is pretty easy for us. We do typically go to like Kota and Jaipur as well. This time we do have colleges from, and Raipur. So yeah, we will make trips to some of your colleges. Okay. Anything else before I get started on our first topic? No? Should we go? All right. So let me start. Okay. Before we start, another quick question for all of you. How many of you can communicate? Let's have a show of hands, right? So you can put your hand up if you think you can communicate. We have about, all right. So more and more people are raising their hands, but there are still about 290 plus people who don't have their hands raised. Come on. Only 39 people can communicate. Honestly, I'll tell you, even if you don't raise your hand, you're actually communicating something, right? You're either communicating that you are here just because your college or university is forcing you to attend and you have no choice, right? Or you are there, but you have least interest, right? So even by not raising your hand, you are actually communicating. You're just communicating something differently, right? So communication is something that we are all born with. From the day we were born, right? We were communicating when we were hungry. We were communicating when, whatever, we had a stomach upset. So communication is a skill that all of us have, right? So we are going to go about, if you remember or noticed, right, we had a topic over there saying for the success, one of the things that is a skill that is required, we call it articulation. Yeah. So the question is, what is the difference between communication and articulation, right? We all agree we can all communicate, right? We can all communicate. We may be, some of us may be better communicators and some of us are poor communicators, but we can all communicate. But a good skill to have for success in life is being articulate. Yeah. And so the question is, what does articulation mean? Yeah. And so to give you a sense of what is articulation, let's ask ourselves another question. Can you guys type in the chat window, anybody, right? What was the class that you attended before you came here, or what is the class that you are going to attend after you are done here? Anybody, just type in whatever class or topic or subject. Full stack development, web technology. Okay, so let's take web technology that Sanjana just mentioned, right? So let's say that you go home tonight, yeah, and let's say that you are living in a joint family, right? So your grandfather comes to you and says, so you had web technology. What does web technology mean? Right? So your grandfather's asking you, what does web technology mean? And then your uncle comes up who is, whatever, 26-year-old, fairly well educated, and comes and asks you the same question. What does web technology mean? Yeah. And then your niece, who's 6 years old, comes to you and says, what does web technology mean, uncle or auntie? Right? And so that is where the question comes in, right? We can all communicate, so we will answer the question, what is web technology, right? Now, the question to you is, are you going to give the same answer to your grandfather and your aunt and your niece? Or are you going to give very different answers of what web technology means, depending on who you are talking to, right? And that is one of the capabilities or ways of figuring out who is an articulate person, right? An articulate person will be able to send their message to the audience such that the audience will understand it, right? When we are communicating, we are talking. When the audience is able to understand it, they will appreciate it and they will say, oh my God, this person is so articulate, right? Because he was able to either dumb it down, make it smart enough such that I could understand. Now, why is this important, right? The reason this is important is because when you go and join a company, right, maybe you have to do your, you are doing a design review or a design presentation of your, project that you are working on, right? and you do a design presentation to your teammates, versus for whatever reason you've done a very good job, and so your boss has set up a meeting with the vice president for you to present that, or the CTO who's visiting your office, you're going to do that presentation, right? Or you participated in a hackathon and you won the prize, and so because the CEO is coming, you are going to be presenting your hackathon to your CEO, right? Now when you are presenting the same thing, right, because maybe your CEO is not technical at all, maybe he or she is a salesperson, right? So the ability to communicate in a fashion such that the receiving party is able to understand it is what articulation means. Yeah. So hopefully that the next time somebody talks about communication and articulation, you will be able to explain to them what it is. Yeah. So I'm going to rush through some of the slides and try and spend more time on certain slides. Yeah. Communication, you all know, right? There are various different types. There's verbal communication, written communication, non-verbal, and so on. And typically, when the questions are simple and easy, like for instance, if I was to ask you, what is your hobby, right? I think all of us can communicate that. What is the last movie that you saw, right? We can all communicate that. But if somebody was to go in and say, okay, why did you like that movie, right? Now, a person who doesn't think about it just says, well, I like action movies, and so I like that movie, right? But if you are able to kind of think a little bit more and provide a response, which is that, I thought in that movie, the characters were very well depicted and the plot was extremely engaging, right? Now, the person who's listening to this is obviously going to form an opinion about you based on your responses, right? Even to simple questions about why did you like that movie? Yeah. And I'm sure each of us would want to come across as being intelligent, as being somebody who thinks deeply and who's able to communicate our thoughts with words in such a fashion that the receiving party understands it, right? So that's the big difference, right? Let's move on and let's take a quiz. Yeah. So I want you to type out the answer in the chat window to the question that you see over here, right? The question is, what is the primary difference between verbal and non-verbal communication? You have four choices: A, B, C, or D, right? A is verbal communication uses words, while non-verbal communication uses body language. Verbal communications is more effective than non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is always subconscious, and verbal communication is only used in formal settings. Should be a simple question. I'm just trying to make sure people are awake. What should be the answer? A, B, C, or D? Please type in your responses in the chat window. Guys, we have 290 odd people. Should be easy, yeah? A, B, C, or D? What is the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication? Most closest. A. Okay. Yeah, I think most people got it, so that's great. Should, as I said, very easy. So right now, here's what we're going to do. I am going to start with an example of what is a very common thing that happens in companies, and we are going to see an example of a very, very poor communication, okay, which is something, as I said, very common in companies. I'm sure even in colleges, you guys must be having experiences, right? Like some of your professors are extremely good at teaching you and some are not. But this is something that happens across the industry in companies. And I'm going to play this out. Please let me know if you cannot see or hear it. Yeah.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to Fairfax Hospital. I'm your Ox Health and Safety Officer, and they've asked me to kick off your induction training by giving you a short talk about safety. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to the safety rules because we have an excellent record of health and safety here. In the last 2 years, we have managed to lower LTIFRs, and we certainly want to keep it that way. So, Anton, Carlos, when your supervisor tells you to wear your PPEs, make sure you wear them, especially the Airbus if you're driving the L4000 Polisher. Okay, because that's got a noise level of about 90 dBA, and I think you'll agree that's pretty rowdy. Now, if you have to use any chemicals in the place, cleaning agents and so on, make sure you read the appropriate MSDS form thoroughly before you decant them. Now, you'll find one in the HasChem storehouse behind lower level 9. Now, Megan, I believe you'll be spending a lot of time in front of the BDU and accounts. Make sure you take 5 every hour or so because we don't want any RSI complaints, okay? Now, all of you will be lifting boxes and other equipment during your stay here. I want you to remember to use your legs and not your backs when you're lifting. And if something looks too heavy, ask for help. There are no prizes for heroes around here. And it goes for you nurses too. When lifting patients, use the sling. That's what we bought it for. Now, finally, all of you, please, no horseplay, no skylarking. Now, I usually have to tell that to the younger blokes, and you do the slightly more sensible lot. So, hope you enjoy your stay at Bay Park, and remember, if there's any queries about OH&S, my door's always open. I'm on 7B, or you can check with your HSR for your DWG. And remember, safety is everyone's baby.
Okay, so what did you think was the problem? Oops. What do you think was the problem? Now, this is a very senior person, yeah, a vice president of safety, coming and talking to new people who have joined the organization, right? And he's talking to them about safety. What was the problem with the vice president talking to fresh recruits? What do you think? Some thoughts? Any of you? There's no right or wrong. But what was the problem that you noticed in that video? Imagine you were the fresh person who had joined. All right, Yugandhar has something. Less time given to comprehend, or was more like an order. Okay, Faizan also says was too dictative. Yeah, okay. That was one problem, which is he came across maybe a little arrogant, was kind of, not friendly enough. He did not ask opinions on the topic. Fair enough. Anything else? Anybody noticed? If you notice the title, right, it talked about jargons, right? So he comes in and he says your LPIT and your DGW. There you go. Meghraj got it, right? There was another problem, right? Somebody joins a company, and believe me, every company has tons and tons of these jargons, right? And obviously new people don't understand it, right? But because you are working over there every day, you forget and you start talking about all these LPIT, DGW, or whatever it is, right? So yeah, and then there was no two-way communication as well, right? So what I wanted to show you was, and believe me or not, like this is very, very common in the industry even today, right? Which is even very senior people, very experienced people never learn this skill that is so critical and important, right? And I hope that each of you realizes that this is something that you need to change. Yeah. So that was an example of something that was not good. Yeah. We've talked about articulation already, right? It is about kind of trying to think deeply, make sure you're giving a more intelligent answer. Why is that a hobby? Why did you like that movie, right? And the ability to answer those questions in a thoughtful manner, plus using language that the other person can understand. Yeah. All right, let's take another quiz. Okay, so Why is articulation important in effective communication? Again, you have four choices. I'm not going to read them out. A, B, C, or D. Why is articulation important for effective communication? A, B, C, or D? Don't have any answers yet. Should be simple, guys. Why do you want to be articulate? The primary reason, yeah? All right, A, that's great. So as I said, all these questions are fairly simple. It's just to try and make it a little bit interactive. So that is correct. Yeah. And then obviously, why is it important to actually have good skills over here, right? A lot of us, especially people who are in engineering, right? We have this belief, and believe me, I was in this camp, right? When I was initially working at companies, right? I used to think like, you know what? Oh, I'm an engineer, so who cares? Why should I care about the skill? This is only for people who are in sales or marketing. But really, right? If you want to grow in your career, right, even if you are like the best software developer and you want to become an architect, a technical architect, so you will remain technical. But unless a technical architect is able to express his architecture, is able to communicate his idea or his plan or his vision, right, you will not be able to become an effective technical architect. So irrespective of your role, if you want to rise in your career, you should be able to take your thoughts and put them into words for the other side to understand, right? That is absolutely needed. If you want to start your own company, right? If you want to become the head of engineering, if you want to become the CTO or the CFO, you will need these skills, right? You also, I mean, it is, you don't want to get into a situation where you lose people when you talk, right? It happens a lot. I'm sure in schools and colleges, it happens a lot, right? When the teacher, even though they may be a good teacher, but just because of their inability to engage the students, are not able to make the student understand the topic that they are trying to talk about, right? You do want to be seen as an interesting people, so that's another reason, as a selfish reason, why you want to develop this particular skill, right? And then obviously the alternate, which is, if you're not an articulate person, you are basically going to stumble, and you're going to be when you are asked a question, you will be like yeah, uh, yeah, yeah. I mean, is that what you want to be when you are in front of people? You might be representing yourself, your team, your company, your country, right, depending on the situation. And you definitely would prefer to be more graceful than awkward, right? So those are some of the reasons why developing this skill. And remember, I said this is not a skill that you are born with. Some people may have this innate ability, but a lot of people I have seen, including myself, I am and was an extremely introverted person, right? So having, using the excuse that, oh, I'm an introverted person, oh, I'm just an engineer, so why do I have to, is just, you are trying to find an excuse to not get better at a very important skill. Yeah. So understand that early in your life and work on it. Okay. One more quiz. So what does the term articulation refer to? Speaking quickly without giving it thought, the clarity and effectiveness of expressing your ideas, using complex jargon, or listening attentively. Should be very easy. What do you think it is? A, B, C, or D? B. Yep, most people got it. So that's great. Okay. All right, so we've seen one example of extremely poor communication in the workplace, right? Using lots of jargon, not caring about who the audience is, coming in and talking as if, you know, he or she is just giving orders. Now, let's look at an exact opposite example, okay? If you talk to people in the industry who've been there for many, many times and ask them about a very good example of a great presentation, right? We are going to watch part of that video. It's about a 3-4 minute video of what is considered by many to be one of the best product launches or one of the best releases. So let's talk about that. Yeah. Hopefully you guys are able to see my screen and can hear the presentation. Okay, I'm going to play it and we'll watch the first 4 minutes or 4 minutes of this video.
Morning. James Brown. So thank you. Thank you for coming. We're going to make some history together today. This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years.
Nancy, the screen is frozen. Can you reshare?
Every once in a while, a revolutionary product.
Sorry, was there something?
And the screen was frozen till now. Now it's visible. Can you repeat the video? Like people.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right, let me try that again. Now?
It's good now, Nan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ganpat.
Morning. James Brown. So thank you. Thank you for coming. We're going to make some history together today. This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been, well, first of all, one's very fortunate if you get to work on just one of these in your career. Apple's been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just change the way we all listen to music. It changed the entire music industry. Well, today we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communication. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. Here it is. There we go, right there. And to unlock the phone, I just take my finger and slide it across. Boom. And this is the home screen of iPhone right here.
All right, so hopefully were you guys able to hear it? Yeah? Okay, so my question, there are a lot of lessons that are pretty amazing in terms of, why is this speech considered one of the best? Any ideas or thoughts on what is Steve Jobs doing with the audience that is making it so exciting, and why this is considered to be one of the, remarkable pitches, as Aman says, right? He's pitching the product and he's doing an exceptional job, but he's using some tricks related to human psychology, which are just absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Anybody has any ideas on some of the things he starts or says, which will get the audience, right? Comparison bias. Okay. Faizan, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a comparison bias over here, but if you have thoughts, maybe you can elaborate, or somebody else. What are some things that he has done over here? Okay, I do think it's difficult, so let me just jump in. Yeah, so I'm going to start with, and I'm going to give you some of them. I can't go into all because otherwise it will become like an analysis of 4 minutes of Steve Jobs' speech, right? The first sentence itself he uses, right? He says, today we are going to create history together, right? Now imagine you are in the audience, right? You're sitting in the audience and you are with Steve Jobs presenting, and he's saying, together you are going to be a part of history, right? And so you're just like super excited about that, right? And then he talks about, he sets the standard, saying that Apple has been, responsible for revolutionizing the whole computing industry with its first Mac. Apple was revolutionized not only the way we listen to music, but the entire music industry changed because of Apple, right? So he's now building credibility about Apple and the fact that they introduced these amazing products, right? And that you are a part of it, right? Then he says, today is the day I have been dreaming for 2.5 years, right? So if you are in the audience, it's like, oh my God, this man has been working on this for 2.5 years. What is the new product, right? So these are some very, very simple tips. But the other thing that you will notice in Steve Jobs' presentations are that they are extreme. There will hardly be more than one sentence. Typically, there are only pictures, there are only words that he uses versus extremely lengthy texts, which is extremely boring, right? Because when you are listening, you're trying to listen to him, but then there is some text that is written on the slide, and so you are like, am I supposed to read the text or am I supposed to listen to him? And trying to keep pace with it becomes very difficult, right? So these are some amazing examples of how to make amazing speeches, yeah, or presentations. But let's continue for now with how do we get better, right? What are some tricks that we can use to get better at this, right? So the first thing, I'm assuming you can see my screen, right, is there is something called as mental models, which we will learn when we go into the topic on critical thinking, right? Which is how do you become a better critical thinker using mental models, right? And the mental models are essentially frameworks of things which are industry terms that you need to get familiar with, right? And one of them is called the Pareto principle. I don't know how many of you have heard it, but it's also called the 80-20 rule, right? Generally in life, 80% of the things result in 20% of the outcome, or vice versa, right? And the 80-20 rule, when it comes to articulation, is the fact that fortunately for us, 80% of the times when you will have to demonstrate your articulation skills, they will be planned, right? It'll only be 20% of the times where it'll be unplanned and you will have to show that you are an extremely articulate person, right? What do I mean by that? Main times when you have to be articulate is, when you're doing an interview, right? Interview is going to be planned. Nobody's going to call you and say, I'm going to start interviewing you. So and so you can prepare for it, right? You have to do a presentation. You have to present your, findings about comparative analysis, or your new design has to be presented, or a new tool that you have evaluated, right? So all these are situations. So the good news is, for the most part, you will have time to prepare for that situation or for that event. Only 20% of the time it might happen, you're sitting in a meeting, you're just thinking it's Monday morning and you're thinking of what you did on the weekend, and suddenly your boss turns to you and says, hey, what do you think of this, right? And then you are like, yeah, man, and you weren't even paying attention, right? And now how do you, or even if you are paying attention, right, let's say, and you've heard everything, but you hadn't planned to be put on the spot by your boss suddenly asking you, what do you think of this, right? So how do you prepare yourself for these unplanned situations to make sure, because sometimes the bosses do this kind of a thing, is to get more ideas, and then the second is he or she is evaluating how well you can think on your feet, right? And these are situations that do happen in companies. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll first attack the planned situation, but before we do that, another quick quiz. Which of the following is an example of unplanned communication, which is you were totally caught off guards? A prepared presentation that you are doing, a job interview, a casual conversation with a friend, or a written report? A, B, C, or D? Which one is unplanned communication? C. Got it. Okay. Awesome. Thanks. We had some quick responses, which is good to see that some people are indeed. Okay, we're going to skip this because we don't have enough time, but we will start with a planned situation, right? When there are planned opportunities, we are going to, again, let me ask a quick question, and please type this into the chat window, right? You are seeing the output of a particular tool, right? Which is, I've taken some thoughts that I had and I've put them into like the central theme or central idea, and then four, points that are coming out, or four sub bullets under articulation, right? Which is, first you have to prepare, then you actually do your presentation. After the presentation, what do you do? And some tips or tricks. I'm curious if anybody knows what is this tool that probably has given this. Has anybody seen or used it or heard about what I am showing? This is a tool that we will get you familiar with, because it is a very good tool to actually put your thoughts down on paper, right? It is what is called as mind maps, right? It is because your mind has some ideas and thoughts, but it doesn't have a map on how to take those thoughts and put it in a fashion such that somebody else will understand it, right? Because in the end, a map is the ability to take person from A to B, right? And mind maps is a great tool that can allow you to be able to put things in a fashion such that you can take your audience through that. Okay. All right. So let's start with preparation, right? When you have to prepare yourself for giving a presentation. Now, all through this, there's a lot of material. Unfortunately, I won't be going through each and every one because we don't have enough time. So I'll try and touch upon only some of them to try and make sure that we cover the key ideas, right? So preparation, the first and foremost thing you need to do is you need to understand what is the goal of this presentation, right? Why are you doing this presentation? What do you want the outcome of this presentation, right? Are you seeking the nod of your boss or the architect of the design? Are you seeking the approval, budgetary approval, that we can go ahead and get the budget approval to purchase this tool? Is the purpose or goal of this presentation that, there was a problem in production, the app was not working, and you are trying to explain what happened, but at the same time, make sure that your VP engineering goes out of the meeting confident that the right team and the right person has done the analysis, right? So you have to understand what are you trying to get out of this meeting or presentation. Yeah? So that is understanding the goals. It becomes very critical for you to know what the goal is, right? The second, obviously, we've talked about it, the audience, right? What is the level of the audience? If you're presenting your hackathon to your CEO, the language you will use will be very different than your presentation to the judges who are evaluating your project for the hackathon. And you need to understand that, right? And then you obviously need to understand the topic, right? General rule of thumb is whatever you might be talking about, you should actually have knowledge at least 10 times of that, of what you are presenting. So if you are presenting for 5 minutes, you should have enough knowledge of that topic that you could actually speak for 50 minutes if you so desired, right? Because there may be questions, there may be follow-ups, there may be things people want to get deeper into. And if you fumble, or if you start demonstrating that you really don't have a good handle on the topic itself, right, and you only know to the depths of what is there on the slide, that's not going to set the right impression with the audience, right? So understanding the topic well enough, you can't be talking about things which you don't have a very good understanding of, and especially when you have time to prepare, right? And then the final one is understanding the tone, which is, should it be upbeat, energetic, or are you talking of crashes that are happening, and then the tone may be very different, and so on. Yeah. All right, let's do another quiz. What is the most important factor to consider when planning a presentation? A, B, C, or D? What's the most important? Should be simple. Yep, See, thank you all who are answering. We do keep a track of this. So yeah, I would encourage people to actually participate. Right. So moving on. And then we come to the main execution, which is, your actual delivery. And again, here, as I said, there are many points, so I'm not going to touch upon all of them, but let's start with the biggest problem people have, right? Which is managing the time, right? Most people I have observed always struggle with time management, right? Which is, you tell them it's a 7-minute presentation and inevitably it'll end up being 17 minutes, right? And that doesn't set the right impression. That doesn't set the right reputation for you, right? Because it's sending a signal to whoever is the audience or your bosses that, you know what, I told him it was supposed to be 7 minutes and he goes on for 17 minutes. He's not able to manage his time right, he or she. So you want to make sure that you plan accordingly, right? You look at it and say, okay, I have 6 slides and each slide I'll speak at least for 2 minutes. So that's like 12 minutes. And they said, 7 minutes, that won't work it. So either I will have to move fast through each of the slides, or I'll skip some of the slides, or I'll have to reduce the slides, whatever it is. So managing your time and having checkpoints for progress, right? So if you're doing a 15-minute presentation, make sure you know by minute 5, I should be on this slide. And if I'm not, that means I'm going to struggle. And so let me adjust, right? So these are surprisingly some of the biggest problems that people have, the ability to stick to time when you are presenting. Yeah. And then comes in, how do you keep the audience engaged? Because unless you keep them involved, right, it is so easy, right? Typical, a person, I mean, I'm telling you, like, trying to talk to you guys for 2 hours is extremely difficult, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't blame you. It's Friday afternoon, come on, right? I've just had lunch. And this guy just is constant, non-stop blabbering away, right? So you need to figure out techniques of trying to make sure, you obviously cannot do it for the entire audience, right? Because everybody is never going to be interested, right? But at least the people who care about their lives, who care about their career, right? Who want to be successful, you need to make sure that you try and keep them engaged, right? So for instance, over here, what I've tried to do is put these quizzes every now and then to kind of keep at least whoever is interested, have them be a part of it, right? Then comes, cultural aspects of things. And by cultural, there are many, many different aspects, right? Let me again share one very common mistake we Indians make, right? And I see this even today all the time, right? We work with people from across the globe, right? In our company, we work with people from Indonesia, we work with people from the Middle East, from the US, right? And in India, we have a tendency of using lakhs and crores, right? And I promise you, the minute they hear lakhs, they are completely lost, because most people have never heard of lakhs. Or even if people have heard of lakhs, they are like just trying to figure out, okay, what is a lakh? Now I forgot. Was it 4 zeros, 6 zeros, 5 zeros, right? So never use terminology which you may be familiar with, but the audience has no clue, right? And just understanding these cultural differences, right? And remember, this is a planned presentation. So there is no excuse for you to say, oh, I forgot, right? You have planned what you're going to say, right? So being aware of these in professional settings becomes very, very important, right? And then obviously, understanding the medium, are you remote? Is it face-to-face? When it's face-to-face, obviously it's much more easier to gauge how engaged, over here, I have no idea how many of you are actually listening, right? Because we have 230 people, but probably we are getting 20 people who are answering the quizzes, right? So obviously these people are more interested and more selfish for their own growth, which is very good, right? But when we are face to face, obviously I could have figured out, probably put some of you on the spot, right? Picked somebody and asked them a question. Very difficult to do it remotely, but being aware of what is going to be the mode, and adjusting, right? Maybe you go in for a presentation and I don't know, the lights go out, right? And you were banking on like referring to every slide while you are speaking and you don't even have lights. So what are you going to do in front of the audience, right? So those are some of the things to be aware of. Yeah. Now, going ahead to post the event, right? Always use the opportunity to collect feedback, right? Go talk to your friends who are part of the presentation. Go to your boss after the presentation and say, I wanted to get some feedback on what did you think about my presentation today? What are the areas I can work on? What are the things that I can improve to make a better presentation, right? And then always pushing your boss for more opportunities. Or if you're in a team meeting and they are talking about, this is a particular problem, right? If you want practice, if you want to get better, right, then being proactive and saying, why don't I take on this particular task? I will go back, analyze, whatever it is, and come back next Friday and present it, right? The more you raise your hand, the more you practice, the better you are going to get. Yeah. So that's important things to do after the event, right? And again, just to show yourself as being organized, right? Whenever you go into a meeting, make sure you're taking notes, sending out minutes of the meeting, what happened, what were the action items discussed, who owns it. These are just things that if you do, right, people will notice, right? And these will be the people who will keep progressing in their career. These are the people who will get more promotions in life. All right, let's do one more quiz. Which of the following tips can help improve articulation during a presentation? Using as much jargon, speaking faster, use pauses to allow your audience to digest information, or avoid making eye contact. Which one is a good tip? A, B, C, or D? C is the correct answer. Yeah. And here's an interesting thing, actually, right? We are generally very uncomfortable with pauses, especially when we are doing a presentation. Why? Why do we think that a pause is uncomfortable when somebody is presenting? What does it demonstrate? What do you think? If somebody pauses while they are giving a presentation, what does everybody start thinking? Somebody, any thoughts? Let's say you are presenting and you suddenly pause. What automatically goes through the audience's head? Did they forget something? Exactly, right? Are they nervous? They had, a speech prepared and he forgot, right? So natural tendency is that pauses indicate nervousness, while the other is also true, right? Extremely confident people have nothing against pauses. In fact, a pause is an exceptionally good trick. Do you know when it's a good trick? Like, for instance, if you want to think of something, you can use pauses if you are confident enough, right? So get comfortable with pauses, because that's a good way for the audience. Many a times, if you put up a very texty slide which has a lot of text, you better give your audience time to digest that information. So get over the uncomfortableness of pausing. Okay, now let's talk of some tips or some tricks that you can use to get better at this. Yeah. The first and foremost thing is, obviously all of us, right? Some don't have it, but most people have a stage fright. They're extremely scared when you stand up on the stage and there are like 100 people. You feel like there are 200 eyes that are just focused on you, and it's quite natural for most people to get extremely nervous. I was, when I did it for the first, I don't know, 10, 15 times, I was extremely nervous. I would like shake, my legs would shake, my voice would shake, and I would forget things, right? So it's quite natural. It's okay. As I said, the way to get better is more practice. The other thing that you could try, yeah, it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for some people, right? Most of us are very comfortable one-on-one, right? We don't have a problem interacting with one person at a time. So when we are on a stage in front of 100 people, try to get your mind to adjust to, you know what, I'm having 100 one-on-ones at this time, right? I'm talking one-on-one with 100 different people. So I look at person A and I say, that's a one-on-one with that person. Then I switch my eyes, go to another. I'm just talking to that person. I look at somebody else and I'm just talking to that person, right? I'm not talking to 100 people at the same time. That could be something which might work for some of you. Yeah. Then there are obviously, always try and start. The start needs to be interesting, right? How do you make a start interesting? You either try and tell a story, or you try and give some statistics that makes it interesting, or you try and ask a question, right? So make it a little bit interesting at the start. The middle, you need to make sure that you can engage with the audience using different techniques. And then when you end, always try and summarize. Okay, here's what we talked about today, and this is what I want you to take away with, right? So those are some tricks that you can use. Yeah. Now, let's take a situation that you've just done a presentation. Yeah. And somebody asks you a question, and you don't know the answer immediately, but you want to give yourself time to think about it, right? And when I say time, I'm not talking of like minutes or hours. I'm just talking seconds or maybe a minute, right? What can you do, right? One thing you could do is, just to buy yourself time is, even though you've heard it, you look at the person and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat? Right? And all you're doing is just trying for him to repeat the question. Or you can say, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I kind of fully gathered what you're saying. Can you rephrase your question? Right? So again, because that person now suddenly realizes that he or she needs to take time and rephrase the question. The second time around, it will be much longer, and you're just buying time for yourself, right? Another situation which you could be in, right, is this is more unplanned, right? But if you're in a team meeting and your boss says, what do you think of this idea, right? Or what do you think of this one another technique to use is, so let me first, before I go into that, try and make sure I've understood what you were trying to say, right? And so you basically then start talking about what you've understood of the presentation, and you're just buying yourself more time, right? So these are some tricks to give yourself time such that you can regroup yourself. Now, always remember, there is no harm in turning around and saying, I'm sorry, I don't have full information or data to answer your question. So I'm not going to answer it now. Let me go back research about it, and then I'll come back to you with the right answer, right? So it is better to accept that you don't know and will need time to go back and come back with the answer than just giving an answer because you want to give an answer, right? So don't try and fake your answer through, and accept it and just continue from there. Yeah. Okay, let's do one more quiz. When preparing for a planned presentation, which factor is most important according to what we've talked about so far? What is the most important thing? A, B, C, or D? Should be easy, like most of the quizzes. Okay, perfect. Thank you to all of you who've answered. Let's move on. Oh, there's one more. What should you do if you encounter an unplanned situation during a presentation? Oh, we just talked about this actually. That's interesting. A, B, C, or D? Unplanned situation, like, somebody asked you a question or somebody asked you your opinion about it. A, B, C, or D? B is the correct answer. Awesome. Great. All right. So we're going to skip this slide, right? Remember, the most important things was understanding why are we doing this? What do we want to achieve? What is the topic? Who's the audience? Then comes, how do you make sure it's interesting? How do you manage your time? All of those. I'm going to skip this because it's self-explanatory, plus too much text. Now let's go to how do you get better in unplanned situation, which is you're in a meeting, suddenly you've been asked, what are your thoughts? And you weren't expecting this, right? How do you prepare for these kind of things? As I said, you can't get good overnight, right? It's a compounding. All these skills are compounding skills. They take time, right? The first and foremost thing, obviously, always, right? We talked about knowledge of the topic, right? So increasing your information density and understanding, right? Or clarity. The more you know, the better are your chances of being able to give a more intelligent response in an unplanned situation, right? I'm going to skip the next two, again, more because out of interest of time. And let's talk about the last one, yeah, which is the frameworks, right? And as I said, there are hundreds, if not thousands of these frameworks. And when we say compounding, the reason we say compounding is because it's very difficult to learn all the frameworks at one shot, right? The more you read, the more you study, the more you listen to different interesting aspects, the more varied topics you are interested in, the better you will get at it, because that's what frameworks are, right? They are certain well-known, well-understood, common practices in the industry. And when I show you a couple of examples, you'll understand what I mean by that, right? But before we go on, let's do one more quiz. What is the best way to improve articulation in unplanned situations? Should be simple. It was actually covered in the previous slide itself. A, B, C, or D? B is the correct answer about increasing the information density. Yeah. So let's take an example of how you can use framework. Yeah. I am going to stop presenting and we are going to go into a situation. Yeah. Let's say somebody is visiting your office. Yeah. Let's say, I don't know, the CTO is visiting your office. You go out for dinner, right? A group of the team. So, you along with your team manager or leader is there, and then there is this visitor, your CTO, right? And you start a question, and it's a very generic conversation, right? So the question that is being discussed is, what do humans want in life? Yeah. So the C-level person just raises the question, what do you guys think? What do people want in life? How are you going to answer that question? Right? It's a very generic question. It's a very common occurrence. You just generally chit-chatting at dinner in a group, sitting at a table, and the question goes to, what do people want in life? How are you going to answer that question? What do you think? What will your response be? The CEO looks at you and says, hey, what do you think, Nurupal? What do people want in life? Somebody, anything. There's no, again, remember, there's no like right answer per se, right? What do humans want? Well, I don't know. I'm sure each of you will have some thoughts, something you're going to say. You're on the spot. Everybody's looking at you and waiting for you to opine on your opinion. Somebody, come on, guys, 200 plus people. Can't be quiet. Okay, so there you go. That's great. So people said success. Aryan says peace. Okay. What else? Happiness. Okay. Satisfaction and happiness. Okay. Nice. I love these responses. Keep coming. Health and wealth. Okay. That's another way of responding, right? A better life, prosperity. True, right? So there's no right or wrong answer, right? That what do humans want? Yeah, we can all say, I want like respect, okay? A life without regrets. These are all great words. But now remember, right? You have your vice president or your CTO, right? All of us want a successful career. You want to make sure you use this kind of an occasion to set the right impression, right? This is your chance. Yeah. So how many of you have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Put your hands up or raise the hand if any of you have heard about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, anybody? Okay, some of you have 3, right? So what I am trying to say is, if you get familiar with, for instance, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is shown on the slide over here, right? What do human beings want? Well, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, every human, the first thing they want is, their psychological needs, which is they need food, they need water, and they need a roof over their head, right? Which is a house to live in, right? Once those are taken care of, the next thing they want is they start worrying about money and safety, right? And once they have that, they start wanting, love and have relationships and marriage and children and so on. And once they have that, they want esteem, right? They want pride, they want titles, they want promotions, right? And once they have that, right, that's when they realize, oh, what have I done in my life? What am I going to do for society? What am I going to be remembered when I die, right? That's the general philosophy of, what is considered to be a classical Maslow's hierarchy. So imagine when your CTO has asked you this question, if you were to say, well, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, it is da 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 da. And I feel of this, the most important are whatever you might feel, right? Now, don't you think that C-level person is going to remember you? Right? Oh, that was a pretty intelligent response to a very simple question, right? So as you use as you get more familiar with various different things in life, and you start remembering these things and start to use them at the right occasion, you are increasing your chances of success, right? So that's one way, that's one framework, right? When I mean by framework, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a very common global, right? Across the world, people know about it. It's not a particular industry specific knowledge, right? Let's do another quiz. What is the purpose of using a framework in communication, right? Why use Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Is it to confuse the audience? Is it to limit our creativity? Or is it to provide a structured approach to communication to make sure people feel that, you think things through, you're extremely structured, right? And that is the correct answer, as most of you, if not all of you, have gotten it. All right, so let's continue, right, on to another framework now, right? And your conversation continues, right? The CEO asks another question. How do you make money doing things that you love? What do you think, right? And they start going around the room, everybody is talking, and you've already demonstrated by Maslow's hierarchy of needs that, my God, this guy is intelligent, he's smart, he's well read, he's structured, right? And the next question is how to make money doing what you love. What do you guys think? How can you do that? How can you make money while doing things that you love? Any thoughts from any of you? Monetization, says Aman. Okay. I'm not sure I fully gather what you mean by monetization. I mean, obviously, yeah, I understand monetization from, like, you love something and then you try and figure out saying, how do I monetize this, right? That's one way. What else? Others? The topic of discussion at your table is how do you make money while doing things that you love? Any others? No? All right. So in the interest of time, again, let's have a show of hands. How many, by doing some innovation in it, says Navdeep. Okay. That's another way. There's no guarantee, but let me ask, have a show of hands. How many of you have heard about the term ikigai? Okay, a few of you, right? It's a very popular book these days, at least 13, 14 of you, right? And what does ikigai say, right? Ikigai says you have to identify what you are good at, what people are willing to pay for, what the world needs, and what you love. And if you can find that intersection, right, and focus on that, because the world needs it, because people are willing to pay for it, because you are actually good at it, and it's actually something that you love, you've gotten the answer to the question of how do you make money doing what you love. So again, imagine same table, if you were now to talk about ikigai, right? What do you think your bosses are going to have an impression about you, right? And that those are some of the things that are setting you up for recognition, for getting your promotions, or at least oh, that guy is smart, let's put him on the more difficult project, right? So that's how you start getting recognized. It's not only how the work you do and the quantity and quality of work, obviously those are important, but there are so many aspects to determine success in a company. Yeah. So I'm going to give you one more framework. Yeah. Again, let's go back to a situation. You are in a team meeting. One of your colleagues has just presented a new idea. Your boss looks at you and says, what do you think? What is going to be your response, right? One thing is you may stutter, You may say, use a lot of and ahs, and say, yeah, I think it's a good idea, right? Versus, let's use a different framework and let's call it the one thing, right? So again, same situation, your boss has asked you, what do you think? Maybe your response might be, I think that's a great idea, but I feel the one thing to make sure that this idea is a success is if we are able to execute it well. And for executing it well, we need a detailed project plan. So let me take this. I will go off and create a project plan and come back to the team and present it by next Friday, right? If that is your response. And again, I'm just saying the one thing doesn't mean that you have to do something, right? The one thing is just a way of trying to force yourself to make sure that you are trying to identify what is the most important thing with regards to this, right? It could be that the one thing we need to make sure is that all of our employees understand that our strategy is this. The one thing we need to make sure is that our customers realize that quality is more important for us. The one thing that right? So the one thing is a good way when you are in an unplanned situation to try and make sure that you are not, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should do it, right? A much more intelligent response, a much more articulate response, because the minute you have to say the one thing, you will try and think of what is the most important thing to say, right? So that's a great framework to use. All right, so we are almost towards the end. And some of the things to remember, right, is when you are in an unplanned situation, like in a team meeting and the boss asking, what do you guys think, right, to everybody? Remember that being the first is not the most important. You don't have to be the first person who is answering that question, right? So fast isn't the winner, right? If you are put in a spot, right, and you have to say it, you could use this trick of saying, oh, let me make sure I have understood what you are trying to say, right? Let me validate my understanding, right? And so you repeat what he said, and you are trying to buy yourself time. Remember, we said pauses are okay. The other good technique is whenever you go for presentations, right? Whenever you go to classes, try and have a notepad and a pen and try and make some notes. You don't need to like write everything down, but at least for anything that you attend, if you are able to write a few things, the minute you are in an unplanned situation where your opinion is sought, right, you can quickly reflect to your notes and try and pick something that you want to make sure you want to talk about, right? So getting into the habit of taking notes, whether in colleges, whether in schools, or even at the workplace, is a good habit, right? And try and learn as many frameworks. We got exposure to 3 frameworks, right? Just a quick question just to gauge, maybe can you guys type out what were the 3 frameworks that we've talked about today so far in the last 15 odd minutes? What are the frameworks that you could use for very generic conversations, right? There are thousands of these frameworks. Actually, we've talked about 4, but 3 in the recent past. Does anyone remember what could be frameworks to think? I don't have problems with pauses, so don't worry. I'm just waiting for somebody to say something. What are some of the frameworks we talked about? Frameworks are just mind mapping. Great, Meghraj, that's a good one. Mind mapping is actually a tool but it's a good framework of how to put on paper what's in your head, right? What's the main thing? What are the subtopics? What are the topics under those, right? So mind mapping is a great framework to use, right? And frameworks don't necessarily only mean tools, right? Like what we talked about when I say frameworks is Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a framework. Ikigai, that's what Aman says, right? Ikigai is a framework, right? I mean, it's applied to that particular question, but it's a framework you could use, right? We talked of Pareto principle. The 80-20 principle is another framework that you could use with regards to, how to handle unplanned situations. All right, let's move on. Another quiz: when speaking to a large group, what approach could you take? A, B, C, or D? Should be simple. Getting over your stage fear. How can you do that? A, B, C, or D? C is the correct answer. Awesome. Thank you, guys. One more. What is the recommended approach when you don't know the answer to a question? So you've been asked a question, you don't know. What should you do? A, B, C, or D? D, great. That is the correct answer. Better to just say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, or I will have to go and research this. Let me come back to you, right? Handling stage fright, we talked a little bit about it. The other thing to remember, I think, is we don't articulate does not mean using very high vocabulary, right? Remember, articulate means the ability to make the audience understand. And in fact, if you try and use vocabulary that your audience does not understand, you are actually losing them. So don't try to be somebody like Shashi Tharoor, who will use language which most of us have to then go to the dictionary to figure out what he was trying to say. Yeah. We talked about being comfortable with pauses. And remember, for starts, one of the things we could do is, if you use data or statistics, that's a good way to keep the audience engaged. Yeah. And then the last quiz, the session suggests that good articulation skills are what? Something that you are born with? Is it something only important for public speakers? Is it a learned skill which you develop via compounding effects? Or is it only needed in formal settings? Again, should be simple. A, B, C, or D. And the correct answer is C. That is great. This is a slide that I am not going to talk about. By the way, we do, share the slides as well as have recordings of these sessions that are available. If you're interested in it, this is just like a summary of some of the things. It's some slides we got from somewhere. But I am going to be pausing the presentation and opening the floor up for any of you. If you have any questions or thoughts or anything about even Satkam related or this particular topic that we did today, let's open the floor up and I will try and answer any questions you guys may have. We did the session on Tuesday. I actually did have some very good questions, 3 or 4. So I'm assuming, and that was from a much smaller batch. And this batch has been equally participative. So I'm hoping for some good questions from you guys. Remember, I said I actually am very comfortable with pauses. So we might sit here for the next 10 minutes waiting for some question to throw up, or you can Some people have raised hands. If you want to speak up, please just unmute yourself and feel free to ask as well, or you can type in your questions in the chat window. Looks like everybody is in a hurry to get into the weekend. Questions? Anyone? About anything? I'll wait for another minute. Okay. Aryan, what are the main pillars of commitment to a big profile person? I'm not sure I fully comprehend that. Okay, so yeah, I guess you're asking for what are kind of some of the attributes, of people. So obviously, the way we lay it out is whatever is your core function, whatever is your main job responsibility, obviously you've got to be exceptionally good at it, right? Then you have to show, you have to be hardworking. You need to be professional, right? And we will do a session on what does being a professional mean, right? Irrespective of your role, it is extremely important for everybody to understand the business side of the house, right? Because every company is in a particular business, and if you don't understand the business of that company, you will not be able to rise up. So it's important to get a good business understanding. And then in our opinion, these are 7 skills that we talked about, right? Articulation or communication, ability to think critically, problem solving, being proactive, which is not just waiting for the boss to come to you, but you have time, just approach and say, hey, I volunteer, I'll do this. Okay, right? So those are some of the things. We have those in our slides that we shared, so you can look those up over there. Okay, now Meghraj has a question. In the one thing framework, what if you're not 100% sure about the thing you're about to point out? Then what? Yeah, I think that's I think in that case, Meghraj, it's better not to say anything than to say something. So if you don't have anything to say, right, it is better to say no. Maybe another approach could be, yeah, I feel it's a good idea. I just need some time, some more time to digest this idea, and then I will come back with more questions or thoughts about it, right? So that way, again, you are actually giving yourself some time and at least saying something which is, I feel like it's a good idea, but I need more time to think about this, and then I will come back with questions or thoughts on the idea. Yeah. Okay. Nihal says, in most meetings, seminars, towards the end, when the floor is open for question like it has been now, even though we don't have any question, does it give us an advantage to ask something? If so, could you help us with a few tips for some things to say towards the end of the meeting to leave with a good impression? I think that's a very important thing, Nihal, right? See, when you look at executives, right, they have teams of 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, right? And the higher you go, the number of interactions you have is only with really the next level of people under you, right? But these are the settings which gives you the opportunity to be noticed, right? Like if the CEO is giving a talk, right, they give a town hall. Generally in every company, every quarter there will be a town hall which will be like updates about how the company did, what is the company's plan for next year, and so on, right? Now, what you have to remember is that obviously the people who ask questions get noticed, right? But at the same time, it is also about asking good questions. It is not only asking a question for the sake of asking questions, right? And again, right, we actually have this as one of the 4 topics, right? Which is, we start off by saying curiosity and being inquisitive, right? These are again skills that are compounding skills, that are learnable skills, right? How do you get better at asking, firstly, asking questions, and then how do you get better at asking good questions, right? These are things, but unless you learn to ask questions, you are not going to, because suddenly one day you're not going to wake up and have this skill that, oh, I can ask good questions, right? Unless you practice on a daily basis, right? By asking questions first and then reflecting on the type of question that you asked versus what you should have asked, right? So again, it's a compounding skill, which means the more you practice, the better you will get at it. But it is one of the best ways of being recognized in the company, that you should not lose out on that opportunity. Yeah, good question, Nihal. Any others? Anything else that anyone has? Okay, if not, I guess we will end this about 3 minutes early, which should be fine since it's a okay, one more question. I think Savidan has asked, what if the ikigai of a specific person isn't valuable or isn't considered in the outer world? Should that person be pursuing the career? See, I think, again, this is more of a personal question, Savidan. There's no such thing as a person isn't valuable, right? They're valuable in some form. Now, the question is the value that the person brings to the table, is that important for either the company or the world, and is somebody willing to pay for it, right? So I think this is too long. I mean, I think this is too detailed of a question in terms of the answer in terms of pursuing a career, whether or not, because a lot of it is kind of situational, right? What I would suggest is that always try and identify somebody that you admire for making your career decisions, and always try and seek out feedback from that person, right? You always want to look out for a mentor who you can turn when you have questions or doubts or trying to figure out, what to do with your career. And actually, Satkam is a good platform for you to try and seek out mentors, because we have people who've been working in the industry for the last 20-25 years and are looking for ways, as we say in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They are in that final phase of trying to figure out how to help society. And one of the things that we all believe in is that one way we can help is by helping the next generation, which is all of you, be more prepared, be more ready, and have a higher likelihood of success in your life and your career. Yeah. So I'll end over there. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for the guys, especially who asked the questions. Hopefully, some of you found some of these things interesting enough and they help you in your future. We will continue with the next session next Friday, and have a great weekend, all of you. Yeah. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.